Often think of culture as something that needs to be preserved. It exists in books, in museums, in rituals that appear only at special moments. In this familiar way of thinking, culture always seems to belong to the past. This story is not about the past, nor does it seek difference simply to be observed. It is a story about how people carry their culture with them, not through displayed symbols, but through their very existence in the world. And to understand that, we begin our journey with the Himba, a community where the human body is not just a form, but a place where culture lives.
And that you see Himbas are not hairy. That color removes also the hairs.
Ah, okay.
Oh.
What's the recipe?
Northern Namibia is a harsh, arid land where the climate shapes every rhythm of human life. Rainfall is scarce, the land is difficult to cultivate, and resources are always limited. In this context, life cannot rely on abundance, but must be organized around the most essential elements of survival. The Himba are a relatively small community. Today, they are estimated to number between 40,000 and 50,000 people, living primarily in the Kunene region of northern Namibia, with a smaller number near the border with Angola. This population is large enough to sustain a community, yet small enough for each individual to maintain a clear role within the social structure. They live in small village groups, often made up of just a few families connected by blood ties. Livestock holds a central place in their lives. It is a source of livelihood, a measure of social value, and a bond linking generations. In a community of only tens of thousands, these relationships are not abstract, but maintained directly through everyday life. There is no rigid boundary between people and the surrounding landscape. Homes are built from available materials, and living spaces remain open and flexible with the seasons. Every element of the environment reflects a long process of choice, shaped and adjusted over generations to fit the climate and limited resources.
Wow. You're a professional.
In a community of this size, every action is easily observed and remembered. The way a person moves, works, cares for livestock, or cares for their body is not simply a personal choice. These are practices recognized by the community, repeated, and passed down as part of shared life. For this reason, Himba culture does not exist as a system separate from daily life. It does not need to be formally taught, because each generation grows up in an environment where culture is everywhere. And before it is expressed through words or rituals, that culture is already imprinted directly on the human body, as part of how people live and survive in this land. In an environment where nature directly and constantly shapes human life, the body is not only a place where the world is felt, but also a place where experiences accumulated across generations are stored. For the Himba, the body gradually becomes an information system, carrying knowledge about both the environment they live in and the way their society is organized. Achais is part of that system. Made from red ochre, animal fat, and herbs, this mixture is used daily as a traditional form of body care. In the hot, dry climate of northern Namibia, achais helps protect the skin, retain moisture, and reduce the impact of the surrounding environment. Over time, using achais is no longer a personal choice, but a shared practice, learned, repeated, and maintained as a form of environmental knowledge carried on the human body.
अपनी मिट्टी बालों से उतार रखी है अभी बहुत सख्त है यार ये और अब दोबारा से ये लोग बनाएंगे इसको
But the body does not only reflect the relationship between people and nature. It also reflects relationships between people themselves. In Himba community life, much social information does not need to be spoken aloud. It is expressed directly through the body, through signs that every member of the community can recognize. In Himba life, hairstyles are not a form of personal decoration, but a system of social communication that the entire community understands and uses. For children, hairstyles are usually simple, leaving the face clearly visible. This shows that they are still in a stage of care and protection, not yet carrying social responsibilities. As a girl grows older, her hairstyle begins to change. Long braids that fall forward over the face signal that she has reached adulthood but is not yet married, an important transitional stage in social life.
They remove four bottom teeth with the reason so that they can speak their language proper. Yes. And they do when they are 40.
When a woman marries, her hairstyle changes clearly. She wears a traditional leather headpiece, known as an irem, and braids her hair in a different way, signaling her new position within the community. At this stage, the hairstyle does not only indicate marital status, but also reflects greater responsibility within the family and shared life. For mothers, these signs become even more pronounced, helping the community recognize their role in maintaining the household and passing cultural practices on to the next generation.
So here, that's the original hair. She made this, and then she puts the clay, and then she made the extension.
Yes, the extension.
This is her natural hair, or is it the extension?
Her natural hair.
Anna.
And then it
Nice
goes.
to meet you.
Anna.
Hello.
Anna.
These differences do not need to be explained in words. Through observation alone, the community can understand how to address someone, the level of responsibility they hold within a family, and their role in social relationships. In this way, hairstyles become a form of language that every member of the community can read. In a community of tens of thousands, where relationships are maintained face-to-face, this system of communication allows society to function smoothly without paperwork or administrative classification. The body is no longer a completely private space, but a meeting point between the individual and the community, where every stage of life is recorded in a clear and visible way. When information about the environment and social roles coexist on the body, culture does not need to be written down or repeated to be remembered. It exists through people who are living, changing roles, and succeeding one another across generations. And when the body carries so many layers of meaning, the community requires a shared anchor beyond any single individual, a place where collective memory can be connected and sustained over time. When the human body becomes a place where environmental knowledge and social language are stored, the community needs a shared anchor to connect all these layers of meaning. For the Himba, this anchor is not found in large structures or displayed symbols, but within the shared living space of the village, where the memory of many generations is continuously carried forward. This space plays a vital role in binding the community across time. It does not rely on complex rituals or lengthy explanations. Daily presence alone is enough to create a sense of belonging, reminding each person that they are part of something larger than themselves. Culture, in this way, does not need to be repeated in order to be remembered, because it is always present in shared life. However, the world around them does not stand still. Modern education, tourism, and new forms of social contact have gradually entered the lives of the Himba. Children attend school, some families engage in new economic activities, and external influences appear more frequently in everyday life.
Pekambura obibi ke wingi ukuyenda kolombali. Ochedi o bubu kugaranda ko juhuro. Achi hechi mungura chino ndiru. Sa bango bombali momweze kugaranda na chide janje.
Ayembe jene njahawanga kuyene hawalendi. Owalendi umana wanyanda lwandu. Tena hitu ni hote banu.
What is notable is that this change does not take the form of complete replacement. Core practices continue to exist alongside new elements, not because they are rigidly preserved, but because the community actively chooses the way of life that suits them. Culture is not held in place by resistance, but by shared agreement. It is here that the most important question emerges: what truly keeps a culture alive? The answer is not found in how ancient it is, or how different it appears from the rest of the world. It lies in whether that culture is still carried by people in their daily lives. For the Himba, culture does not exist as an outer layer that needs to be protected. It lives in bodies that move, work, interact, and make choices every day. As long as people continue to live through these practices, culture remains present, not as a distant memory, but as part of the present.
Tout le monde qui veut s'en perdre, va s'en
And perhaps what this story suggests is not meant only for the Himba. It points to a broader reflection: culture does not disappear when the world changes. Culture truly fades only when people no longer live with it. Before these changes took place, the lives of the Kayapo people were closely tied to the Amazon rainforest in a very concrete and practical way. The Kayapo are one of the larger indigenous communities in Brazil, with around 10,000 people living across the Xingu River basin. They do not live apart from the forest, nor do they see it as a distant or unfamiliar space, but as the setting where everyday life unfolds. In traditional daily life, the Kayapo hunt, fish, and practice small-scale farming, enough to sustain the community without exhausting the surrounding environment.
Right, he's saying go.
Movement largely follows rivers and familiar forest paths. Areas used for hunting, cultivation, or communal activities are not marked by fixed boundaries, but by shared understanding built over time. In Kayapo life, the forest is at once a source of food, a space for social interaction, and a place where collective memory is held. Their social life is organized around strong bonds between community members.
Here.
Rituals, body painting, and traditional dress among the Kayapo do not exist merely as decorative elements. They are among the most visible signs of a carefully structured social order. Colors painted on the skin, geometric patterns, necklaces, bracelets, and feathered headdresses are not used at random, but are tied to specific moments in community life. Through these signs, outsiders can recognize who is participating in a ritual, who holds important roles, and who is at a particular stage of social life. They are embedded in communal activities, marking significant events and expressing relationships between individuals. In this context, culture is not an abstract idea, but an inseparable part of everyday life. For a long time, this way of living was stable enough to maintain a balance between people and their environment. The forest was not seen as something to be exploited to its limits, but as a space that needed to be sustained in order to continue supporting the community. For the Kayapo, living in the Amazon was not a symbolic or idealized choice, but a simple reality of life, much like any other community connected to its homeland. Only when the surrounding environment began to change did this familiar order start to be tested. What had once been considered stable no longer functioned in the same way, and the daily lives of the Kayapo began to require adjustment.
Nangetere amite kai prene geno nangete
Yumare pukwa kame bakuka mare makum mekum emane anyuroba nama emane anyuroba nama kabenyare joy lo nyumi klarua nyume
The changes around the Amazon do not happen suddenly, but build up gradually over time. For the Kayapo people, the first signs are not abstract ideas, but disruptions in everyday life. Familiar paths through the forest become harder to use. Hunting and fishing no longer follow the same rhythms. Activities repeated across generations begin to require constant adjustment.
Trazer de volta para nós o rio, o peixe, a terra, a floresta, animais.
As the forest is fragmented by extraction activities and new infrastructure, the Kayapo's living space shrinks in very tangible ways. Areas once used for hunting or communal gatherings become difficult to access. Food sources grow less predictable, forcing families to rethink how they divide their time and labor. This is not an immediate disappearance of traditional life, but a growing sense that what was once familiar is becoming harder to sustain with each passing day. These changes also affect how knowledge is passed down. When the environment no longer follows old patterns, the experience of previous generations does not always provide clear answers for the next. What once ensured safety in daily life now needs to be reconsidered. An order built on repetition and stability begins to lose its reliability, pushing community life into a state of uncertainty. It is within this context that the Kayapo begin to speak out more openly. This does not come from a desire to represent a global cause, but from a very practical need to explain why the changes taking place make it impossible for life to continue as before. When everyday activities are directly affected, remaining silent is no longer a viable option. The Kayapo engage with journalists, appear on camera, and take part in public meetings to talk about what is happening to the forest and to their lives.
Punya pika kami dia mai pega boine ho mo. Nek malu kaji
Ya banancho ada ye ambo bunmu kama ipika kama kuchile hompune to agame.
Mana mue unyo wakati almai taminine kotnya kama almai taminine wa mana ya minine kama almai tanya kam almai te aminine unyo wakati boy kam me bengo kle kukla jane kam ne ba ayane nyu me kuni kute mali ne kute
Isso aqui é acabação.
katia kambame peranyo hakatika maben puji hinyo bikwame inoi kanikoi.
As a result, the Kayapo gradually come to be recognized as one of the most outspoken indigenous communities when the Amazon is discussed. What matters, however, is how they speak. Traditional clothing, body painting, and their public presence are not meant as performances or attention-seeking displays, but as extensions of cultural life into a new space. This is how they bring their own language of identity outward, helping others understand that changes in the Amazon are not only environmental issues, but issues that affect people who live in the forest.
Mereka kami mampunya dikuati. Katakan ini bah ada amu jape aiten taji. Papa jamja kamja. Baba ne kabete. Baba mo kukata. Me kabete. Me baba ni me kabete. Baka mana penyakam. Amjal kami jamne amuyo tenta akute guarda ne kabenia kunia muyo tenta ji anima lekam mnami kute.
The escalation of the story does not lie in a single conflict, but in a layering of many small shifts, a changing environment, disrupted daily life, and a community compelled to step beyond familiar spaces to speak about its own existence. From this point on, the Kayapo are no longer only those affected by change, but one of the voices most often mentioned when the Amazon is discussed, not because they sought that role, but because they could no longer continue living in silence.
Clubs, the Kayapo have brought along video cameras. A forest tribe have jumped an entire industrial revolution and are using tools of high-tech communication. The villages back in the forest will be able to see how a hydroelectric dam affects the rivers and...
In that context, the Kayapo people do not stop at speaking out. More importantly, they continue to live, on their own terms, in an environment that is no longer the same as before. Daily life goes on, hunting, farming, communal activities, and the organization of rituals. Cultural practices do not disappear, but are adjusted to fit new circumstances. At the same time, the Kayapo begin using modern tools to document that very life. Cameras, images, and media do not replace traditional culture. Instead, they become part of how it is preserved and shared. Through this, the Kayapo appear not only in public moments, but also in everyday ones, family life, festivals, and rhythms tied to the forest. Culture, in this case, is not presented as a static heritage, but as an ongoing practice. The turning point of the story does not lie in the Kayapo becoming symbols of the Amazon, but in their refusal to be invisible. Appearing before the world is not about representing a global issue, but about affirming that they are people living in this forest, with very real needs, choices, and responsibilities. The Kayapo are not trying to return to an idealized past, they are trying to continue living in the present, with what remains and what is changing. From here, the story turns back to the viewer. When we talk about the Amazon, we often ask questions about forest coverage, climate, or the future of the planet. Alongside those questions, however, there is another that is just as important. Are the communities who live in a forest seen as living subjects, or merely as parts of a problem to be solved? Perhaps what truly matters is not how many traditional elements the Kayapo have managed to keep, but whether they are still able to live with their culture in a changing world. Culture does not exist to be frozen or preserved from a distance, but to be practiced every day. And as long as communities like the Kayapo still have the space to continue living, the Amazon remains a place with people, not just a forest on a map. To understand the Kalash, it is necessary to begin with the context in which they live. The Kalash are a small community living in remote valleys in the northern mountains of Pakistan, mainly in three valleys, Bumbaret, Rumbar, and Bairar. Their population numbers only a few thousand people, a very small figure compared to surrounding communities. This modest size means that the Kalash cannot rely on numbers for protection, but instead depend on the internal cohesion of their culture. One of the reasons the Kalash are often mentioned is the traditional belief system they maintain in a region where the majority of the population follows Islam. However, the Kalash way of existence is not based on confrontation or separation. Their beliefs are closely connected to nature, agriculture, and the cycles of community life, practiced through festivals and shared activities rather than through doctrine or formal interpretation. Because these beliefs are lived daily, rather than merely declared, they are able to exist alongside other belief systems within the same social space. Kalash life is organized around the community. Festivals are not rare occasions, but important points in time through which the community recognizes itself. During festivals, people eat together, sing, and dance, with no clear division between participants and observers. Culture, in this context, is not something performed for display, but a shared practice that helps bind the community together. One notable aspect of Kalash life is the relatively open role of women in social spaces. Kalash women participate in festivals, appear publicly in community activities, and have a degree of personal choice in marriage. This is not seen as a social statement, but as a natural outcome of a cultural structure formed over a long period of time. It exists not to position the community against the outside world, but to serve its internal balance. Traditional Kalash clothing is also an important part of this cultural journey. Dark-colored dresses embroidered with vivid patterns, along with elaborately decorated headpieces, not only help identify the community, but also carry collective memory. In a world that is becoming increasingly uniform in appearance, continuing to wear traditional clothing is a way for the Kalash to affirm their presence without the need to speak. For many generations, the Kalash have maintained their cultural life and traditional belief system in a region where most surrounding communities follow different spiritual norms. This makes Kalash culture not only a story of identity, but also a story of parallel existence. At the center of Kalash life is a belief system closely tied to nature and the cycles of life. This belief is not formalized into fixed doctrines or written texts, but exists through communal practice. Oral traditions, seasonal rituals, and festivals serve as threads connecting people, memory, and the world around them. Festivals hold a particularly important place in Kalash culture. They do not only mark changes in the agricultural seasons, but also provide moments for the community to reflect on itself. During these occasions, music, dance, and shared meals help strengthen bonds between generations. Kalash social life is built around the public presence of the community. Collective activities take place in open spaces where people can see one another and participate together. Women play a visible role in social activities and festivals, appearing as a natural part of community life. This is not emphasized as a declarative difference, but understood as a long-standing way in which the community has maintained its internal balance.
स्पेस कैसा होता है इसका क्या
Another important aspect of Kalash culture is how space and time are organized for daily life and ritual. Certain practices are carried out in specific places and at particular times, helping preserve the order and meaning of spiritual life. This division is not meant to exclude or create distance, but to support a sense of harmony between different aspects of life. From this perspective, order does not come from rigid rules, but from shared understanding passed down through generations. Traditional Kalash clothing also plays a significant role in maintaining identity. These garments are not only aesthetic, but also serve as markers of community belonging. Continuing to wear traditional clothing in daily life is a conscious choice, allowing the Kalash to remain connected to their collective memory. In a world that is increasingly uniform in appearance, this presence becomes a quiet yet persistent form of affirmation.
जैसे कि आप मुझे देख रहे हैं मैं आप सबकी अपनी माही ठीक है और ये हमारे में क्लास है ठीक है और ये
जी ये जो कैलाश वैली का जो सबसे बड़ा फेस्टिवल होता है उनका जो है या मेला है जो बहुत ही रंगारंग तकरीब में जो है ना वो सेलिब्रेट।
हाँ यही मैं पूछूं लेकिन 3 दिन शादी नहीं होती नहीं 1 दिन होते हैं 3 नहीं होती हाँ नहीं होती एक दो दिन फंक्शन होते हैं। अच्छा
अगर किसी कलाश की लड़की को किसी मुसलमान लड़के से प्यार हो जाता है तो अगर वो अपना जो रिलीजन है वो चेंज करना चाहती है तो फिर
हाँ वो कर ले।
A culture is sustained not only through rituals or clothing, but through whether people continue to choose to live with it. And as those choices become more difficult in the modern world, the journey of preserving Kalash identity grows more fragile than ever, as their way of life stands before changes that cannot be reversed. When looking at the Kalash in the context of today's world, the story no longer focuses on how different they are, but shifts toward a deeper question: what happens when a small culture enters the space of global attention? Tourism, media, and increasingly easy connections mean that the Kalash no longer exist only within the boundaries of their valleys. They are seen more often, spoken about more frequently, and placed within new frames of the modern world.
他走下来个哟，大家就是说路开来不行。
For the Kalash, the greatest challenge is not change itself, but how to change without losing who they are. As younger generations gain access to modern education, use national languages more often, and leave the valley to study or work, the connection between them and traditional community life becomes more fragile. Culture does not disappear overnight, but it faces the risk of interruption when practices once